Good evening, gentlemen. Wonderful time. I thought I'd have a few words with you. I'm going to talk to you today on the efficacy of the American army. Now, we've been talking everything about the Russian army, we've been talking to the Ukrainian army, the Chinese army, and the question arises, how good is the American army? A very important question and a very important answer because it requires a deep study. Now, as far as American military power is concerned, there is no doubt that America is the number one power in the world. It's the most powerful nation, has got a budget of almost $600 billion, and that's a lot of money. And you talk of Russia, you talk of India, nobody's got more than $70 to $80 billion as their military budget. And the Americans have got 600. So you can just imagine how much of money are the Americans pouring into their military. America also has the strongest navy, and in a sense, out of all the global nations or the global navies which can operate, the American Navy is the only one which can operate in all the 7 seas. That is the point. They got 10 super carriers, which are an exponent of military power, and nobody has more than 2. And none of the countries in the world have the super carriers like the Nimitz or the Ford, which displace over 100,000 tons, have a complement of a crew of almost 6,000 or 7,000 persons. Now, these are very big figures. America also has the strongest air force in the world. I find when I was doing the staff college course that the Americans have almost 20,000 helicopters at their beck and call, the American military. They have the latest fighters. I think the best fighter in the world, the F-35, which is unmatchable, is with them. They also have the strategic bombers, which can penetrate any area in the world. In fact, the US Army, Air Force, and Navy have got global reach, and no other country has a similar reach. You talk of Russia, it's a regional power. Thanks to the communist rule, from a global power, they reduced Russia to a regional power. China, also a regional power. It can't operate in South America or North Atlantic or anything like that. They don't have the capability. They don't even have the capability for an amphibious attack on Taiwan. India, of course, is way down at the moment. It's a good defensive force, but offense is not part of the Indian strategy. Now, despite having such a big military and a global reach, one inalienable fact of world history is that after 1945, the Americans lost all the wars. Now, this is something which has not been explained, and it's very difficult to explain why the Americans could not beat the North Koreans and the Chinese in Korea in 1950-53, and they had agreed for a stalemate and a ceasefire along the 38th parallel. Why the Americans never made a stand for Hong Kong to incorporate it, and why the Americans gave their rights in the South China Sea to China, nobody can explain. And why did the Americans lose in Vietnam when they had the best bombing force in the world and they were bombing North Vietnam for weeks and months together with their B-52 bombers? Come later, there were the Iraq wars. They messed it up. 2 wars in Iraq resulted in complete eradication of American influence in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq. That's very sad. And then we had the Afghan war. They went and fought there for almost 2 decades. And ultimately, they retreated and That retreat has been referred to as the mother of all retreats. Now, it's very difficult to explain. Now, again, the Americans are involved in Ukraine. They are trying to make their presence felt, supporting Ukraine with weapons and money. And the aim is very simple, to finish Russia as a superpower. Anyway, Russia is not a superpower now, it's a regional power, but they'd like even that to be destroyed so that they have the hegemony all over Europe. Now, if the Americans are unable to win any war in the global realm, the question arises, what is the efficacy of the American armed forces? I think we should not read into these defeats as a lack of American will or lack of American preparedness. What these defeats show is that the Americans are not ruthless enough and they make wrong choices. Look at Vietnam. I think the Americans could have easily won the Vietnam War if they had not been supporting the corrupt regimes in Saigon and no restrictions had been put on the US Air Force as far as the targets in North Vietnam and South Vietnam was concerned. There were limitations, with the result the American armed forces were fighting with one arm tied behind their back. Afghanistan, if you carry out analysis, you will find that they committed a big mistake in taking Pakistan at face value. Pakistan ran with the hare and hunted with the hound. That's what they did. And they were responsible for hundreds of American deaths because they were supporting one faction of the Taliban at the same time opposing other faction along with America. If the Americans had destroyed the sanctuaries of the Taliban in Pakistan, the war would have been won. But again, it was lack of foresight and political will and fond memories that Pakistan is a friend that spelt their doom. So there is a reason for every defeat, but a defeat is a defeat. What is the chink in the American armor? The chink is the American General Staff. I don't think the American General Staff has really experience of fighting wars with a strategy to win. When you want to win at any cost. And it's like in mathematics, you have the theory of probability. You have got to study all the options and take the best course forward. In such a situation, you cannot go around thinking that such and such country is my ally for last 50 years, so I got to go soft on them or something like that. At the same time, you make the proper assessments, like they badly miscalculated everything as far as Saddam Hussein was concerned or Gaddafi was concerned. I think these two men were more prone to supporting America, and yet America made them enemies. Similarly, Russia is more prone to become a pro American ally against China, but they've driven Russia into the arms of the Chinese. So it's a faulty strategy. And of course, part of all this goes on to the American military, which is not able to influence the policy. Another big problem is the American soldier. Now, you may have any amount of sophistication, weapons, this thing, that thing, but the fact is, the Americans have forgotten the cardinal principle of warfare, which has been enunciated by Field Marshal Montgomery, that you need the infantry soldier to hold the ground. And that is where the Americans have lost out. Their weak chink, despite all their superpower carriers and bombers and the infantry soldier, this man is not motivated enough, and they are too few in number to influence a battle. With the result, despite a preponderance of technical superiority and electronic warfare capability, the infantry soldier is unable to hold his ground in the war, and this is where the American shoe pinches. Gentlemen, America remains the number one power in the world, but at the same time, it is not invincible. And we have seen that Ukraine is once again proving to be the Achilles heel of the American military. American military doesn't want to get into a combat in Ukraine now after the licking they have received in other places like Afghanistan, and also the way they have burnt their fingers in Iraq and Libya, even Syria. So they're not going to intervene in Ukraine, they're fighting a proxy war. But proxy wars do not lead to results. And as I told you, the infantry soldier has to hold the ground, and the Americans don't have that. They will not be able to, in my view, sustain their effort in Ukraine because ultimately, if not today or tomorrow, once Zelensky goes, Ukraine will say hands up. And we'll have to wait and see what happens. If America can take stock of the situation, change their political strategy, and decide who is their enemy and who is their friend, and not just go thinking that everybody is like they always think Russia is their enemy, which is not the case. I think the threat to America is more from China than any other country in the world. Well, gentlemen, I will close now. America has a very formidable military, no doubt about it, but it doesn't give results, and that is what matters. And Achilles' heel is the American soldier because he is unable to hold the ground. I close now, gentlemen. Wish you all the best. Do subscribe to my video, share it with your friends, and I'll close now and say, Jai Hind, glory to India.